Hey guys, it's Miss Bogus again. And today we are going to go back and talk a little bit about poetry. And we're also going to read a nonfiction text that's going to go with one of our poems today. And so we're still going to be reading, I'm going to read you two poems again from Thunder Underground. One of them is about ants and one of them is about earthworms. And as you can see on the screen, today's nonfiction text is going to be about earthworms. I've always been pretty fascinated with earthworms, and I think that you are going to find them very interesting little creatures too. But before we read the nonfiction text, I want to share with you the two poems again from Thunder Underground. The first one is Oh, to be an ant. And I want you to still be thinking about those things like repetition, alliteration, rhyme, how the poem makes you feel. Does it appeal to your five senses? Oh, to be an ant. Neat, quiet, indifferent to anything but constant work. Hurrying, scurrying, burying, line after line, their labors unceasing, from heel to heel, always quiet, never still. Their mega city, chambered, tied by endless highways, byways made by workers, hauling dirt 4 times their weight. Not architected by one wheel, but thousands working, never still. So these ants, you can tell in this picture, they are busy, busy little workers, which is basically the image that I get from the poem when I read it. And then our second one, the one that we really want to focus on today with our nonfiction text, is called Earthworm. Inch by inch and root by root, there's some repetition there, the tiny earthworm crawls. It makes its living in the dirt, creating its own walls. It oils those walls for ease of passage, gurgling as it goes, a slime machine, while all around it things just decompose. Here's a picture of the earthworms there. Do you see them? Up in there. So they're a little bit different than the ants that we just read about, in that they are kind of slow and they inch along. They're not busy workers like the ants, but they're still super important. And so today we're going to read our nonfiction text called Earthworms. Now, what I want you to do as we read this text is I want you to find your sheet that looks like this. And if you don't have a copy of this, you can do this on notebook paper. So just write earthworms are at the top, and then you're going to make your chart. Can, have, and are. So we're going to write down some things, or I would like for you to write down some things that earthworms can do, some things you hear that earthworms have, and some things that you hear in the text that earthworms are. And this is just a graphic organizer to help you organize your thoughts. And when you're finished, you can turn this into your teacher. And this will show your learning from the text. So I will also do some examples as we read through, but have this paper handy while you're listening to the text today so that you can jot down some things in your graphic organizer. All right, earthworms. So we have our table of contents. Remember, that's a really important part of a nonfiction book that tells us what page to find certain things on. So these are some of the topics we're going to read about. In the first section, this heading says gross. Do earthworms look gross? Yes, I think most people would agree. But what you might not know is just how fascinating they are. Earthworms are an essential element of keeping our soil healthy and prepared for plants, trees, and vegetables to grow. So I see the word are there. So on our chart, we could write earthworms are an essential element of keeping our soil healthy. So earthworms are important for soil. Have you ever wondered why some days you see tons of earthworms on the sidewalks and other days you don't see them at all? Have you ever been curious about how earthworms move or whether they have live babies? How do earthworms help our soil? If you keep reading, you will learn the answers to these questions and many more. Their body. Most earthworms are a reddish brown color and have long segmented bodies. So earthworms are reddish brown. Earthworms have long segmented bodies. That might be something you could write. And again, these are just examples, and I'm not going to tell you every example from the text. So just listen to some things that you could write. The most fascinating feature of a worm is actually their lack of one. What do I mean by this? Earthworms don't have eyes. They do have cells on their skin that sense light, and then they move away from the light. If you think about it, eyes wouldn't be particularly useful when you spend the majority of your life in the dark. Just think of other animals like moles that live underground. The eyes they have are very small and weak. The earthworm doesn't have lungs either. It absorbs air through its skin. So one for your section, your can section, you could write, an earthworm can absorb air through its skin. This is why their skin is so thin and must be kept moist at all times. Predators. As you can see from this photograph, birds love to eat most kinds of worms. Robins specifically love earthworms. Worms are an easy meal for birds to transport to their young up in their nest. Other creatures that eat earthworms are ones that spend a lot of time in the dirt, like insects, amphibians, and reptiles. If you see a big hole in your yard, it could be the result of a raccoon or fox hunting for an earthworm dinner. You also may already know that many humans use earthworms for fishing bait. How many of you have used earthworms for bait? Me too. The worms will stay alive and move underwater, which attracts the fish to the hook. The popularity for using worms as bait is partly due to being able to go into the backyard and dig them up for free. So, earthworms can be used as fishing bait. That might be a good one to write on your chart. Young. I'm going to show you the picture first on this one. Let's take a close look at that. If you look closely at this picture, you can see earthworm cocoons holding worm eggs. At first, cocoons are like a liquid. So if you look here, you see all these little things here? Those would be the cocoons, and they're filled with liquid. But they quickly harden. While inside the cocoon, the eggs are protected and receive all the nutrients they need to develop. After 2 to 4 weeks, they will hatch from the cocoon. Earthworms take about 3 to 6 months to mature before they begin producing their own cocoons for young worms. Worms that live near the surface have more baby worms at a time than those that live deep in the soil. If you assume this is because the worms near the surface are more likely to be eaten by predators, then you are correct. Movement. Worms do not have legs or arms to help them move through tunnels or on the surface of the dirt. Their bodies are covered in tiny bristles that they use like little anchors in the dirt. So, earthworms have tiny bristles on their body. When they squeeze their muscles, the bristles help them pull themselves through the dirt. Worms love damp but not soaking wet, loose soil. This type of dirt is easier for them to move through. Have you ever wondered why you see so many worms after it rains? A common myth is that their tunnels are full of water and they can't breathe. But since worms don't have lungs, being underwater is not harmful for them. They do prefer to come out after it rains because it is the only time that the sun doesn't completely dehydrate them. Worms prefer to find their mates above ground. So a lot of times after it rains, we see them on sidewalks and laying on top of the ground, and that's because they have so much moisture that they can be out in the sun for just a little while without dehydrating. And dehydrating means that you have no water or liquid inside of your body, or you have less than what you need. Regeneration. Here is another fact about worms that has a lot of myths surrounding it. If a worm is split in two, it will not grow as two separate worms. What will happen is that the side of the worm that has the head may continue to live and regrow its tail. The head is on the side of the tail where the swollen part is closest to. You can tell that the tail of an earthworm has been regenerated or regrown if the tail is slightly lighter in color and thinner than the rest of the worm. So you can kind of tell here at the end of this worm that its color is a little off. And so what that probably means is that that worm has probably been cut or torn in two at some point, and it's regenerated its tail since it's a little bit lighter color. So that's pretty cool. So worms can regenerate their tails. And this is why we want earthworms. Earthworms might be gross, but they are super important. As an earthworm travels through the dirt, he eats and then leaves behind nutrients that make the soil rich and better for growing plants and vegetables. The tunnels of earthworms also allow the dirt to soak up water. More water in the soil is beneficial for two reasons. It allows water to get to the roots of trees deep in the earth, and it also aerates the ground. Aerate means to make holes that allow for oxygen to get in. The looser soil allows for roots to grow deeper so that trees are stronger. Overall, it is extremely important to allow earthworms to live in your yards and gardens. See now, they aren't so gross after all. So another one you could write, earthworms are super important for trees to grow and plants. So I think that you've heard several things that you can add to your earthworms can, have, are chart, and maybe try to do 2 facts for each section, more if you would like, and then you're going to send that to your teacher to show your learning from this nonfiction text. If you have time this week, I would love to hear some of your poems. And I'm sure that your teachers would too. So if you have extra time this week, try to write your own poem. It might be one about nature, like the ones we read from Thunder Underground, or it can be a poem about anything that you choose. So maybe something about spring, or maybe about your favorite sport. But I want you to think about all of those things that we've talked about when you write your poems this week. And be sure to send those to your teacher, and hopefully she will be able to have some of your poems appeal to her senses and help her understand your point of view about something that you might really love to write about. So I hope that you guys have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next week. Thanks, guys.